Biddy, 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 biddy. You know this voids my warranty.
Nice going, Buck.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again. I think my name is Robert. Is it?
You sure?
I'm not sure. I gotta check my card.
I thought it was Admiral Happy Endings.
Oh no!
Yeah. Oh, you know, I can't pick that for myself.
TMI, TMI.
You called me the mad scientist.
Well, you know, let's give, you know, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll give a little introduction of what that means.
Well, I'm the mad scientist. Well, I'm Ray, co-host, and I'm down in Australia. So g'day from Australia.
And we have again one of our favorite guests here from Scarif podcast, Ro. How you doing, Ro?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me. This is going to be a lot of fun. Yes, that's correct. I am Ro from the Scarif Scuttlebutt podcast, part of the Red 5 Network. Just chilling here at the Science Fiction Remnant Studios. Excellent.
Awesome.
I'm trying to look into your massive collection in the background and see if there's any material relative to our IP today.
No, I do not have any Buck Rogers material. My room is filled with Star Wars things for the most part.
Wait a minute. We're not doing Galactica?
Are we? It's easy to confuse the two. It really is. But I'll get onto that later.
Yes.
Okay, so here's a little what's a little bit, you know, information on what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, so you guys are not lost. As you know, we have Geo that eventually became Captain Chaos for all the chaos that he caused. So lately, and I don't know, maybe you guys listening out there want to pitch in, but we wanted to find names for the other host. One name that is floating around for Ray is the mad scientist. And I guess you guys were deciding on what to name me based on my preference in sci-fi. And what was the name that is floating around that you guys haven't decided yet?
Admiral Happy Endings.
Wait, that's his preference in sci-fi?
Yes, he likes happy endings.
Well, you know, that has double meaning because it is implied that I like the happy endings in everything. So the movie could be amazing, but if the main character dies at the end, the movie already sucks for me. And
our good friend from the Elite Army, Angelus, is on Robert's shit list because every time he comes on, he picks a movie with a bad ending.
Yeah, you guys go back on our feed and listen to all the episodes where Angelus is on, and you'll see what I'm talking about. He brings all those really dark, you know, bad endings. And he brings the oof.
That's funny.
So yeah, it could have a double meaning. So I don't know that would stay, but well, you know, I do like Galaxina and, you know, Barbarella, so maybe.
I watched Barbarella as a delicate 17-year-old, and wow.
Yes. Wow. Yes, we were lucky that we had our best friend Nikky from Dear Nikky for that episode.
Yes, I remember that.
It was a lot of fun. Okay, so let's move on to our first segment. We are Science Fiction Remnant.
This is the Funny Science Fiction Podcast.
We are the Caribbean Science Fiction Network.
We are MonoRants.
We are One Accord Level 2 Podcast.
This is Jesse from Sudden But Inevitable and Open Pike Night.
This is Sci-Fi.
And for this segment, you know the drill. This is where we let you know of a little tiny hashtag that we follow and then we enjoy. This is Sci-Fi. And basically, as I mentioned in every episode, this is a way for us to try to unite everybody that either creates or enjoys anything within the sci-fi genre. So I invite you to follow that if you're looking for more sci-fi content. And if you're a creator, definitely. It doesn't matter what type of creator you are. You could be a movie producer. You could be a podcaster. You could be a writer. Just follow and post. And for all of us fans, they have our love within sci-fi. Just post what you love, because there's a big chance that someone's following that hashtag will not know or will be, learn from your love for the first time and encounter something new in their search for sci-fi. And, this is something that I basically started because of that particular thing, where I would go online and find, I find the communities, the sci-fi communities. I find the Star Wars community. I find the Star Trek community. But I really did not find one combined sci-fi community. And that's the whole idea behind this is Sci-Fi, is to help each other discover what we love. And so in the hashtag, I don't know exactly if you have, what was your experience this week on the hashtag, but there has been a lot of, we have the sci-fi history.net posting every single time with the article, which, by the way, Zimmerman from sci-fi history.net, we really appreciate the article that you wrote about us. Thank you so much. And I do enjoy the conversations. So we have, creators and fans actually posting what they love on this week. There's one particular post that I want to call out is from Cinema Recall, and it's the episode that they did with us about existence. Was actually featured on Good Pods as a feature episode. So that was really, really cool to see that in the recommendation page in Good Pods.
Some people would call that movie Existence, but as they do in the movie.
Existence. Ro, have you seen that movie? Existence?
Say again?
Have you seen that movie Existence?
No, I have not.
Oh.
Does it star Mark Hamill?
No. This is just one of those very obscure movies that deserve a lot more views.
If you like somewhat creepy sci-fi, and like things like Matrix or Inception, this could be for you. This could be a guilty pleasure. The bone gun with the teeth bullets is pretty disturbing.
Yes. Oh yes, awesome.
I do like that movie for a lot of its unique ideas, and it was pretty well executed, I thought.
Yeah. Anything that you guys want to point out on the This is Sci-Fi? Could be the hashtag, could be the group.
Killy for life.
Huh?
Killy for life. I know it's not Star Wars, so Ro wouldn't get it.
Well, if you are a member of the Sci-Fi Council, you might know what that means.
It's the evil universe version of Tilly from Star Trek Discovery. Yeah, I'm trying to remember which particular show it was. There's so many of them.
Oh yeah, and that's a great thing nowadays with sci-fi. It's I'm loving it.
So much out there. Yeah,
it's crazy. I remember when I saw the last of the 3 Star Wars movies, and I was just so hungry for content. and there wasn't anything out there. Now it's like everywhere you look, and same for Star Trek.
Well, Mandalorian season 3 just started too, so yeah.
Oh yeah,
there's that.
So good, so good. And for all of you who want spoilers, here's what happened.
Here's a list.
La 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 la.
Oh no, I'm not going to do that. We're talking about Galactica, this one over here. So yeah.
No.
Wait a minute.
Oh God. Okay.
I just love it when Admiral Happy Endings picks a topic and can't remember what he picked.
Oh God. Okay, so let's move on to the next segment.
Shout out.
And in this segment, basically what we want to do is we want to thank the engagement. So if your name is called in, that's basically it. If your name hasn't been called in, don't feel bad. There's so many people out there. So basically what we do is we just pick for this particular week in the last couple of days. And just thank you for engagement. For if you have engaged with our show, like we have said in the past, we really, really appreciate it. You have no idea how much we thank you for the engagement. And it just means the world to us. So the first one here is the Insane Dangerous Retro Podshow. Thank you so much. This is at TID Podshow on Twitter. Thank you so much for your engagement. We have the next is HeidiLeeStockenstrom. I'm sorry if I'm killing your name, but on Twitter is at HLS, actually HL Stockenstrom. We have Jade all day USA 2. Thank you, Jade. We basically miss you, so thank you for coming back. We have Open Pike. They celebrate, I think, the 1 year anniversary. Great achievement. Love the pod. And I guess Starfleet Dad with his Pike hair. Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Kelly Szentgyorgyi is at Antipodal. Thank you so much. MonoRants, the movies podcast is Rants Mono. Thank you. And we have Admiral Funnest Frontier at Deck Lower. Love that show. Lower Decks. And RoboPulp at RoboPulp in Twitter. We have Steve Horizon Brave Ghostworld at My Ghostworld. Theo Williams at Theo J. Williams. And we have DJSkoob, that is DJSkoob 2021. All of those, thank you so much. And we're really looking forward to our conversations about our previous episode, this particular episode, or anything you like to talk about. And just remember, the engagement also extends to our Discord channel. So join us and you can talk to us daily on the Discord channel, and we can talk about anything that you like to talk, anything that we have covered or anything that you like us to cover. So just remember, you can reach out in many multiple ways. And just to let you know, we are part of the Blind Knowledge Podcast Network. So blindknowledge.com. And you can find a lot of other podcasters for any particular taste that you have. Specifically, if you like anything other than sci-fi, there's probably going to be a podcast there that you're going to find and you're going to enjoy it. So the next segment,
the Outer Remnant.
So Ray, where have you been this week?
In bed dying. I managed to food poison myself with a boiled egg that had gone off, and apparently it's one of the worst things you can food poison yourself with. It's up there with like seafood and meat as one of the worst things to get food poisoning from. And yeah, it was horrible. So I was incapable of doing anything. In fact, this week's recording is multiple days late because of me. I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, so yeah, I didn't go anywhere except lying in bed and running off to the loo. So,
oh,
so
wow.
Yeah, don't look at me. Don't look at me. Maybe Rose got something.
Not as good as yours.
Wow, you had a rough time.
No, actually, I just what is today? Thursday? Actually, this morning, I just released an episode I did with Anthony of the Sci-Fi Wise Guys, talking about science fiction tropes. We put together a small list of some of our favorite science fiction tropes or plot devices that happen in some wonderful science fiction movies. So yeah, if you're on any of the your favorite podcatchers, just call out the Scare Scuttlebutt podcast and take a listen to the latest one. We talked about time travel. We talked about dimensional travel, multiverses. What else is out there? Beaming up, instantaneous transformation, that sort of thing. So a very spirited discussion we had with Anthony, and I had a lot of fun talking with him and putting that one together. So check it out.
Awesome. Okay, so let's start talking about Galactica now.
I could actually do that. I was a big
could,
fan
yeah.
of Galactica. I could. No worries. We can just
Let's
transition. I'm nothing if not flexible.
we'll fix it in post.
Yeah.
Oh, no. We had to do that in the last recording, and it did not go well. So we want to avoid that.
Yeah, for all of you who are not, you probably are familiar with this, and probably are wondering why. So our previous episode, from the time this gets aired, you're going to notice specifically, I think towards the end of the episode, where Captain Chaos is being beeped for the first time on this show. Don't ask. I'm not going to say. Just know that we had to fix it in post.
he got a little excited and we had to rein him in.
Wow.
So yeah, it was so funny. You've probably seen the videos on YouTube that I posted. So and our faces too.
Yeah, my face especially, because he wouldn't let me talk. I was like, I'm going to pretend you didn't say that. So he said it another 8 times.
Oh, nice.
Okay. So do you have the plot, Ray?
Well, actually, yeah, I'm going to cheat because I was a little bit concerned that Wikipedia was failing me. Being a television series, and this being a 2-part pilot episode, they didn't really have a clear plot for it. But then I was informed by good Admiral Happy Endings over here that it actually was released as a movie as well, which wasn't uncommon for sci-fi at the time. In fact, Battlestar Galactica was released the pilot, and the second season pilot was also released as movies to cinema as well. So it was a thing that was done with sci-fi at the time, especially from Universal. Universal. Universal like to get double duty out of their pilot episodes and turn them into movies and put them out to bring in a little bit more budget. So it actually costs $3.5 million to do the pilot for Buck Rogers. The 2-part, what became the 2-parter season 1, episodes 1 and 2, which basically set up the premise for what the show would be moving forward. And it made box office of $21.7 million in the US, which is pretty good for sci-fi of the time. So it was quite reasonably popular. And thankfully, as the movie version has a plot, I'm going to cheat and use that.
Yes.
Now, I haven't quite got the voice of the guy who does the voiceovers for this. Is the same one who does the voiceover for Battlestar Galactica, and it's got that real timbre to it. So I'm not going to be quite as slick as he is, or he was. This was some time ago now. I believe I was 8 years old.
I was 9.
No, I was 10 years old when this came out. So it was a while back. Thank you, Mr. Cylon. In a fictitious 1987, NASA astronaut Captain William Buck Rogers is piloting a space shuttle Ranger 3 when he flies into an unexpected space phenomenon and is frozen for 504 years. In the year 2491, his shuttle is found drifting in space by the alien flagship Draconia, which is headed to Earth for a trade conference under the command of Princess Ardala. Yes, Ardala. It's a bit of an odd word. Princess Ardala and her aide-de-camp Kane are former native of Earth. Rogers is revived from his cryogenic sleep and is questioned by the princess and Kane. Princess Ardala is visibly attracted to Buck, though Kane arranges for Buck to be placed back on his shuttle and return towards Earth. It turns out that the Draconians are actually planning to conquer Earth through staged pirate attacks on Earth's shipping fleet, forcing Earth to seek a treaty with the Draconians and unwittingly open up their defenses to the invaders. They had this big energy shield around the planet with only a very specific way to get in, and you have to know where it is. They plant a homing beacon aboard Buck's shuttle while tracking its way through Earth's planetary-wide defense shield. Buck is escorted through the defense shield by Colonel Wilmer Deering and of Earth's military forces. He lands in a futuristic city of New Chicago, where he is interrogated and learns that Earth has been rebuilt in the centuries during his absence following a nuclear holocaust, and now much of Earth outside the city is a desolate radioactive wasteland. During his time in the city, Buck meets Dr. Elias Hewer and the leader of Earth's Defense Directorate, an AI named Dr. Theopolis, the robotic drone Tweaky, most of whom attempt to help him to adjust to his current surroundings. While recounting his encounter with the Draconians, Buck notices several discrepancies and suspects that the Draconians must be armed, contrary to the terms of the trade meeting. Against advice, Buck ventures outside the city to the ruins of old Chicago in an attempt to see if what he's been told is real, eventually finding his own parents' graves and having to be rescued by Wilma and her troops from the violent mutants inhabiting the ruins. Following Buck's return to the inner city, the Draconian's tracking device is found aboard his ship, and the authorities accuse Buck of espionage and sentence him to death. Buck claims the Draconians simply used him, while Wilma persuades Dr. Hewer to test Buck's claims by requesting a meeting with Princess Ardala and Kane aboard the Draconia. During the meeting, the pirate ships, actually Draconian marauders, attack their flagship as a diversion, but Buck manages to destroy them single-handedly, thus earning Wilma's respect. Yeah, don't use the combat computers, guys. It's pretty damn obvious that they suck. At the official diplomatic reception on Earth, Ardala, who is still attracted to Buck, invites him back to the Draconia later that night. Buck uses the invitation to go aboard and finds out the truth behind the Draconian scheme. On the ship, Ardala informs Buck she needs a man such as him to rule by her side and offers him the position because she's got 29 other sisters that she's got to fight off to try and take the throne. Not to mention her father. After drugging Ardala, he roofies her, Buck explores the ship and discovers their marauders and imminent plans to attack Earth. Dr. Theopolis and Tweaky, who have followed Buck aboard, eventually meet up with him and alert Earth to the Draconian invasion. Wilma immediately scrambles her starfighters and attacks the Draconia, while Buck sabotages the Draconian marauder fleet prepared to attack Earth and fights off Ardala's bodyguard, Tigerman. During the battle, the Draconia is critically damaged, but Buck, Theopolis, and Twiki are rescued by Wilma before the ship explodes. Ardala and Kane also escape the Draconia's destruction in an escape shuttle, while Kane vowing to return and take his revenge on Buck. Roll credits. Show is set up for the first season. Everybody, all the players are in place.
I have to say, and this would be a question for everybody as well, just because I'm curious. I was 9 years old when this movie started, and I did not realize, especially on this pilot, until later on a rewatch after the 80s, when I saw the space shuttle for the first time. And my impression, and I can't remember how, what actually came out of my mouth, but it's something along the lines of, hold on a second. And I'm looking at NASA and I'm looking at the space shuttle, and it's like, hold on a second. Isn't that Buck Rogers' ship? Because I was not aware that the space shuttle program started in 1972. Did anybody go through that, or it sounds like it's probably
my logic break was Saturn V's don't launch space shuttles. What the?
Yeah,
but it seemed like it was it was either a shortened space shuttle or one that had replaced the entire cargo bay with engines or something, or fuel, because it didn't have the doors that opened at the back. The sort of engine nacelles ran further forward, so it was either a shortened. Yeah. It either had a shortened hull or they'd done something to modify the actual space shuttle to make it a bit different, but. Yeah, the very first images.
Yeah, it still had the shape though.
Yeah,
and going back as a kid, I mean, I remember the space shuttle program because one of the earliest space shuttles was called the Enterprise, and obviously being a sci-fi fan, Star Trek, whatever, you knew about the space program, you knew what was going on. That iconic shot of the space shuttle that was being carried to the flight area, like on top of a 747. So I knew about that. I knew about the shape. So once I saw Buck Rogers and I saw the shuttle, I just kind of put two and two together. It didn't really surprise me. So I think that was all you, Robert.
Yeah, I figured it's usually me. I mean, when I was 9 years old, I was not aware of any space program. I guess mainly because I was that young. But I did not put it two and two together until I saw the space shuttle for the first time, and it was after
What were you doing? Like chasing girls or some stupid thing like that? Jeez.
The Enterprise actually never flew. Launched from Cape Canaveral. It was used as aerodynamics testing on top of a 747. Yeah. So those shots of a shuttle on top of a modified passenger aircraft are all the Enterprise. That was its job.
Yeah.
Because the big part of building a space shuttle was making the thing come back unpowered. Right. It had to be able to glide, so the aerodynamics had to be spot on. And the biggest problem with the whole damn thing was those tiles. They kept popping off. That was a huge issue. In fact, there was some pretty big technological leaps in glue production to get those suckers to stay put.
It gets hot in re-entry.
Yeah, real hot. Damn hot.
No, but I guess to answer Ro, at that time, I was just dreaming about Princess Ardala and William Dean.
Fair enough.
I get it. Fair enough. Yeah.
You were dreaming about Princess Ardala and Wilma getting together, were you?
That's the happy ending.
With him in the middle. Yeah, I get that.
Oh wow. But you know how it is, 9-year-old hormones.
Hey, back in the 70s, you were allowed to think about stuff like that. You're not allowed anymore.
Yeah.
Well, apparently it was something very close to that at the beginning of the movie. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie. I mean, obviously we're talking about the first, part 1 and part 2 of pilot episode for Buck Rogers. But the movie was actually, which I find very interesting. There are things that are in the episode that are not in the movie, and there's things in the movie that are not in the episode. And I find that really interesting because in theory, if I recall other times that this has happened, usually you have a lot more time to do more content on a TV show. So basically, if you get to do a movie from a couple of episodes, you would have to cut it because it would be longer than, especially at that time, how long the movies were. But in this one, I found it very interesting because they did with the movie and they did it with, so they kind of reserved some shots for the movie and then some shots for the TV show. One example that I can give is in the episode when Buck wants to go out into the streets of Chicago, and we see he's having he's planning it with Theo, after Wilma, after the discussion with Wilma, he's planning with Theo. So Theo would say, go to sleep. We got to wake up early tomorrow because I got to go with you. I mean, someone has to save you, basically. But in the movie, it ends when they were in the deck where he was telling Wilma that he was going, and Wilma raised her gun to shoot at him and eventually did not. And then the next thing we see, he's in the... So it's basically, from there, they cut on the movie the conversation that he had with Theo in his apartment room. Would you guys notice that? I mean, I don't know if you guys seen the movie.
I haven't seen the movie version, no.
It's really interesting.
I have not seen the movie version. I last week I started just rewatching the series on Tubi. But yeah, it was I think it was very common to do that. I mean, getting back to talking about Battlestar Galactica, when the movie came out, it was slightly different than when the series started out. And I can't remember. I was telling you guys last time before we tried to schedule this, I may be a big Star Wars nut, but one of the biggest enjoyments I've ever had in a movie theater, in an actual movie theater, was watching Battlestar Galactica in the theater, because the projectionist had the volume up so high that the seats rumbled when the Colonial Vipers launched from the Galactica. So as a kid, I found that thrilling and exciting, and so I don't know, it enveloped the entire theater, which I think
so basically
I think
early
really
4X.
great. Early 4X, yes, absolutely. Yeah, and you try to replicate that feeling, especially now everybody's got some really decent home theaters. The wife won't let me turn it up to 10 though, but it is what it is,
you're a step ahead of me. The wife won't let me install it.
It's too funny.
You'd think, but
yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised if it changed a little bit. I know the inclusion of Tiger Man was edited heavily in that first episode, movie versus series. I remember reading about that as well.
Yeah, and the more I think about it, the more I think it makes sense, because if they are going to get some money by making it a movie, I figure, and this is just me thinking, and I haven't read this anywhere, but it makes sense to me in my head that they would have to give you something for your money that you don't otherwise get it for free. Otherwise, you just don't go to the theater and just watch the episode.
Right.
It kind of reminds me of the many versions of Blade Runner, where
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, it's always a bit different. There's always something taken in, put out, and taken in, and you know, taken
Right.
in, put out. Whatever. But you know, it's different. They're all different. You got to watch them all to really, you know, get your mind across the entire storyline. But yeah, I can understand that, you know, you got to offer something a bit different for each experience, and they're probably expecting slightly different audiences as well. So they're trying to cater to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I skipped through the part of because you know I tend to do that. I just ramble on. So the initial question that I was curious about was, how old were you guys when you saw this, and what was your first? You know, you talk about your Ro already talked about his experience on the movie theater, but I'm not sure if this is the first time that he saw it, or did you guys see it on the TV? So basically, what was the first time you saw it, and how old you were, and your experience in that?
Yeah, I saw it on television. And again, you know, anything having to do with space at the time, because it was the late 70s, I thoroughly enjoyed, obviously, my love for Star Wars, but it was one of those things where if it happened to space, you know, I wanted to see it. So Buck Rogers obviously is a name that's very familiar in the sci-fi world, with some of the old classic movies, but this new television series, I did see it on TV, and I think when did it come out? 78, 79?
79.
Yeah. So yeah, I was 10 years old.
September 2079 to April 1681.
Yeah.
On NBC.
We won't talk about that second season, at least not yet. But yeah, 10 years old. I really enjoyed that first season. Obviously, I felt so connected to the series because it happened in New Chicago, and I live in regular old Chicago, so that was a lot of fun for me to hear the words Chicago in science fiction.
Did you recognize any of the streets when he went down to the city?
I think the rats were the same size.
What about the fashions? Are they the same, or have they changed?
Pretty much the same, yeah.
Right, yeah, fair enough. So they just pulled Chicagoans off the street and got them to play the signs.
Ray, how old were you, where you saw it, and what was your experience, your very first experience?
I don't have nearly as much contextual memory of this show as I do with Battlestar Galactica. I was a Battlestar Galactica nut I think I was in year 6. I remember clearly in 6th class I had to see it every week, and had to talk my father into letting me have the TV for an hour, because, you know, back then there was no VCRs, so you couldn't like record something while watching something else. Yes. But yeah, I have much stronger memories of Battlestar Galactica than I do of Buck Rogers. The moment you mentioned, let's do Buck Rogers, I remembered biddy 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 biddy, but I completely forgotten that he had comedic one-liners after he would make that noise. I can only remember the noise. I could not remember the comedic one-liners, so they must have just gone straight over my head, and at that age, and I just didn't get them.
Yeah, I mean, there's his first one was when Buck Rogers asked him for a drink because he was, you know, spilling the beans and telling him, yeah, you're 500 years in the future, and Buck wasn't believing Dr. Hewert, and he did get the drink, and Buck takes it and takes a swig of it, but Twiki, it's funny, Twiki goes, L'chaim, like, you know, he's a Jewish droid.
but all sorts of random stuff that he'd come out with, like, bitty, Buck, you're my kind of guy. Stuff like this.
It's so random, but it was so cool.
But this show, like, it's a lot more lighthearted than Battlestar Galactica. I keep comparing it to Battlestar Galactica. There's a good reason for that, because they're both created by the same team. So there are a lot,
like most of the props, the special effects, all that stuff got recycled. I was like, that's why it looks familiar.
And a lot of the audio sound effects and things as well.
Notice when they shoot out of the Draconian ship, it's basically the Battlestar Galactica launch sequence.
It is, but they've put multicolors in there. It's rather than just red. It's been I picked up on all that stuff because I'm a detail junkie. But I mean, a bit disappointing that the Earth had been trashed. But it's good that they were still there. And you know, there was a lot of explanation about, well, we really need this trade agreement because our trade's fallen down because of these pirates, and you know, the planet's not very self-sufficient after a nuclear war, so you know, we've got to rely on our trade partners and stuff like that. And you know, there was a serious side to it, but I found that Buck Rogers also seemed to be drawing pretty heavily on the comedic side of properties like Roger Moore's James Bond. In fact, the way that Gil Gerard plays Buck Rogers reminded me heavily of Roger Moore's James Bond, and he might have even been channeling him. Have you noticed that? I don't know if you guys know much about James Bond.
I know.
Yeah, I can see that. I think I think more or less it was the archetype of the macho hero of the time. More that than specifically, you know, James Bond. Although you know, you can definitely make an argument there. But yeah, absolutely.
But it's that sort of semi-refined joking sort of comeback.
Swagger. Right.
Yeah, the swagger. Yeah, and I mean, I haven't watched Buck Rogers since the 70s, so I couldn't remember much of it. But I immediately drew that comparison watching it for the show here, because I could almost see Roger Moore playing this character. I mean, obviously British versus American, but it was so similar. It was probably just the flavor of the time. You get a lot of these sort of flavors, or I call them flavors, but you might call them sort of tropes that run through, not necessarily like science fiction or adventure or what have you, but just how people act at that time, because other people are doing it and doing it well, and you know, making bank, so they copy them. So
sure.
And you know, what was considered beautiful and what was considered handsome and all that sort of stuff, very late 70s, early 80s.
Right.
So it's heavily reflected in the sci-fi. And of course, this wasn't made as a movie series. This was made as a TV series, so it had a certain level of budget and expectation, which wasn't kind of right up there with big budget movies. So you got a certain level of special effects, you got a certain level of acting and character design and props and clothing that they were wearing, and it really does, like, you can watch this without knowing when it was made, and if you live through that era, you go, oh yeah, I know when this was. It's got all the hallmarks of late 70s adventure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I kind of like all the type of comedy that it was written into the character of Buck Rogers. It was at least heavily on the beginning of the series. You know, it got a little better as they learned to know Buck. But it was heavily dependent on the fact that he was in on a joke and no one else was, because of the time difference.
Right.
So he was like we see it from the very beginning when Wilma was escorting him in, you know, back to Earth through the corridor. He says, "So do you have manual override?" And he says, "Sure." And so then follow me closely. And what he said next is, "Be right on your tail," with a big smirk on his face.
Right. Very innuendo-ish.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's the sort of angle that the humor was going for, that the viewers and Buck were in on the joke, but everyone else was like this uptight, futuristic person who had no concept of what the joke was. And so they would, the rest of the universe was the straight man, and the joke was between Buck and the viewers. So
yeah,
it was that sort of private comedy. Like he's got the wry smile and he's chortling to himself like, "Ha, I'm so funny," and nobody else there gets it.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Like, don't you think this room, you know, it's beautiful? You know, it's not beautiful, but like, you know, he had put some pants on, and they're like, you know, you want to be in here, right? It's like they both look at each other, Wilma and here, and it's like, no.
Nope. Doesn't work for them.
But they played it really well, because, like, for example, if you rewind back to when he was actually calling Earth, as he would call Houston, because he's approaching his vectors and all this stuff, the way that he was speaking, it was very. I don't think that it would be the way an astronaut or someone at that level would have spoke under the same situation, though. It's more like this is an average man talking back to Houston Control, and he's using a lot of like sentences from the time, from like late 70s, like almost to the point of being slang, you know, like slang. And the people listening, they're like, it's like it's different. It's another language.
The language, right? Yeah.
And I love how they actually played it like that, because back to what Ray says, it's like the joke, we're in the joke with Buck and no one else.
Right.
And throughout this whole, specifically this episode, we see situations like that, where they introduce a funny sequence, a funny scene, and we get it, and everybody else is like completely clueless. I don't know about you guys, but I really love how that was done, because they could have done it.
It's also a way to introduce a sci-fi landscape which the average viewer, television viewer, wouldn't be able to understand through the eyes of Buck, who is who is the viewer surrogate. He's dealing with it with the sensibilities of the people who are watching, and that draws them into the main character as their surrogate. So the connection is with the viewer rather than with the science fiction trope that's on display. And that's a way for introducing people who are not particularly science fiction literate into science fiction. So it's a good way to give people stepping stones to get into the story.
Yeah, Buck Rogers was the ultimate fish out of water in that series, and he was played, you know, so the audiences could relate. Like, you know, what if, and actually the audiences were kind of like with him on this adventure, because, you know, you're living in this century and he is not, so he's kind of exploring in the same way that you would be exploring if you were in that situation. So it worked out very well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
And I think the humor helped as well. You know, there's a lot, you know, there, especially during before he leaves the ship, the Draconian ship, they give him a little bit too much happy juice.
Oh yeah.
And you know, he starts doing his thing. And then, you know, great performances too by Gil Gerard in that situation to be thrown into this series, and comedy is like kind of like the first thing that you really have to concentrate among a cast that are not supposed to be laughing, like they don't understand what the hell you're talking about. So I think it played out really well.
No, I've discussed many times before that when we you know look at pilots, oftentimes the show hasn't really found its feet yet, and it's a little bit muddy, and you can't really judge the entire show off a pilot when the cast isn't used to each other and the character writing hasn't settled and all that sort of stuff. But they really hit the ground running with this one. I don't know whether it was Gil's performance particularly, or the writers were just, coming off the back of other things like Battlestar Galactica, and they already had their stride going. But this really worked straight off the bat, so it was impressive.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nail there. You hit the nail on the head there with, I think if it weren't for the fact that Glenn Larson was part of the writing team, obviously you said, him coming off of Battlestar Galactica, there's already kind of like a rhythm that they established in Battlestar Galactica. For them to just go ahead and not really continue the theme in Buck Rogers, but at least the writing team seems to have explored different character traits of the main characters in Galactica. And I'm sure, through some sort of weird osmosis, they were able to kind of bring that forward to Buck Rogers. Buck Rogers seems to be, a little bit Starbuck, a little bit Apollo, if you kind of think about it. And I think, like you said, I think it helped that the writers were coming off of other things, in this case, I think, namely Battlestar Galactica.
Now that we're talking about Galactica, there's something that I always thought, and let me explain. So Galactica, 1978, I find a split audience. So I want to say about half the people that I talk to, they really, really enjoy 1978's Galactica. And for the most part, most of those people enjoy the 2000 Galactica. And then the other half of the people, they think 1978 Galactica sucks. And the only good Galactica is the 2000 ones.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because I love the original 78 Galactica, and I tried watching the new Galactica. I couldn't get into it.
Yeah. I like both.
I started out where you were, Ro, but I persevered, and it actually gave me an epiphany about science fiction and reboots, and the fact that even though it felt different, it still had the same bones, and it was just a re-exploration of the characters, and it actually turned out really good. I like both of them now.
Well, I want to add that I might have ended up like Ro in here, because I remember when I saw the 2000s Galactica for the first time, I was a little disoriented because I really liked the character of Starbucks. And he's, the way that he's, if you've seen 78, you know what I'm talking about. He's very like sly and, cunning and at points funny.
Cigar chewing. And
now they give you this, and again, I have to explain myself because many people think, oh yes, because they gender bender. I don't really mind the gender bending, and I'll explain later, right? But I feel a little disoriented because now I got a gritty Starbucks which is not.
By the way, it's only one Starbucks, not a whole bunch. Starbucks.
Well, there's at least two.
There's at least two.
Yeah,
so,
right.
That's plural.
Make mine tall.
It's Starbucks. Now we get this female greedy character on Starbucks, and I was confused, and I didn't know how to feel. And I want to say about maybe, I don't know why I want to say the third episode, I was sold on it. And I loved the show after. Another conversation that I had is because I typically don't like dark. Again, That's why you guys are you're giving me that name, but Admiral Happy Ending or whatever. But I typically don't like dark stuff. That's the reason why I only like one Batman, and that's Michael Keaton's. All the other Batmans I really don't. And you know, dark stories. But I love this Galactica. So this kind of breaks the mold, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I'm saying this long story is because the team, I read somewhere, and I can't really pinpoint where, the team that actually worked on the 2000 Galactica, they did their homework. They actually researched the 1978's Galactica, the story, what Glenn Larson wanted to do, and they did a reimagined story because obviously they didn't want to, you know, they did look at how when they try to reboot something, they can screw it up. So it's easier and better to reimagine and be original, and you have a better chance of success than trying to replicate the wheel. Right? I think that paid off for this particular show because in my eyes, and I know, bro, you probably, I don't know how far along you got into that 2000 Galactica, but for me and half the people that I talked to, we loved it. We loved it equally, and I think that actually paid off. That research, that you know, that what they were trying to do, and then they just reimagined to make sure that they were doing something, they don't screw up what was already done, because it's kind of hard to redo what was already done. For all of you who are actually watching our YouTube channel, which is one of the benefits of having watched our YouTube channel, Ray is actually showing us Starbucks and Starbucks at Starbucks.
I couldn't actually find the right meme, but there's actually one that says Starbucks and Starbucks having Starbucks at Starbucks, which works even better. But yeah.
So yeah, so there you go. So wait about a month. Go into our YouTube channel, subscribe, like, and you can actually watch what we're actually showing. So what I was going to say is, why I'm saying all this is the fact that this show, in my eyes, and I like to see what your opinion is. I kind of
you're definitely going to turn this into a Battlestar Galactica episode, right?
He's trying from the very beginning.
I kind of know what Ro is going to say, right? But I'm going to say it anyways. I think this show would be a candidate for that team to do a reboot and a reimagined of the story. Do you guys think that if we have that team or someone that is doing what that team did, we could have a likable reboot on this lightning in the bottle?
Well, that's interesting because the Galactica from 2000 received many, many accolades and awards from the science fiction community all over the place. For me, I didn't like it because they changed a lot. Not only the fact that Starbuck is a woman now, but I could not get into, you know, the fact that the Cylons were blonde. You know what I mean? I couldn't get into that. Yeah, it's Cyblons. I couldn't get into that. You know, Boomer was an Asian woman. Again, you know, not a big deal, but I think for me, they changed a lot, and it kind of bummed me out because I really do cherish that original series. I did like the actors. I liked the story, and I thought it was great. And then, you know, I can't remember how far I went into it, but it gave me a different feel, and I didn't continue with it after, I don't know, 2 or 3 episodes maybe. But I understand the importance of it in the realm of science fiction television. Like I said, you know, back in the day on the Sci-Fi channel, it was doing some really great special effects for the day and for the times, and the budget. There's some stuff that I saw that was like, oh, wow, this is really great. But I just could not get into it at all. Never finished it. You know, from time to time, regularly, I go back to the original Battlestar Galactica and do a rewatch of the entire series, at least, you know, once a year, sometime in the year, because I just enjoy those actors so much. I enjoy that story and that world.
Well, hey, one of the actors from the original is in the reboot, so you get a bit of crossover.
Yeah.
But,
I wish that he got his wish and made the actual reboot of their version of Galactica.
You mean the extension where he's the commander?
Yeah. Poor Richard Hatch. I think died too soon.
They did that in comic book format. I remember reading it, but it never actually made it to the screen.
That would have been so freaking awesome. Yeah.
And I know they did a YouTube pilot using, you know, fan money, or I think it was a crowdsourced. It was kind of like a proof of concept, goofy little green screen, you know, special effects, just to get some of these actors together and prove to the studios that there was interest in them coming back, but never amounted to anything.
Yeah.
So I guess Ro's answer is no, and very understandable. So, like I said, this was a lightning in the bottle. Now, Ray, you like Galactica? You like both?
Well, like I said, I had a lot of trouble because my brain was trying to overwrite the original Battlestar Galactica with the new one, and it didn't work. And much like Ro, I was like pro original Battlestar Galactica out the wazoo, and I'm like, oh, this new thing, it's not the same, it's not right, rah. And then I gave it some time, and then I saw what it was trying to do, and it was doing different things, and I went, actually, no, this is okay. They're doing different things, and by the third season, I was sold. I was like, and the end of it, I thought, like, a lot of people complain about the end of it, but I thought it was great. I thought the way it sort of looped around again was fantastic, and I thought that it was, you know, well worth having been made, and I you know, really, I hadn't fallen in love with the characters per se, but I was certainly on their team, and I thought that they'd struggled hard, and the storytelling was good, and that was actually the two series and that situation that made me realize that retellings and different approaches to things weren't bad. They weren't, the new one didn't destroy the old one, it added to it by going in a different direction, and my appreciation of sci-fi expanded thanks to that situation. So I'm for reboots and things like that. I mean, I would have loved to have seen more Firefly. I think that show got completely screwed over by Fox, and I don't think that they could go back with the original characters now. Too much time's passed, but I could see a reboot, and, you know, a careful reboot, respecting the original, and, you know, bringing more into it and expanding it and doing it. Not just throwing in tropes that seem to fit, but actually writing it with love and respect, much like The Mandalorian's done for Star Wars. I could see that a reboot of Firefly could go really well if it's done with care. And it's all about how the creatives, how they put it together and what they put into it and what they're allowed to put into it by the studio, which is often the big problem. But you know, if it's done properly, I think that a new Buck Rogers could do well, because, you know, Buck Rogers, this version of Buck Rogers is not the original.
Right.
Yeah,
you're aware of that, right? Buck Rogers was actually created by Philip Francis Nolan in 1928.
Right.
So, you know,
I saw that one. I saw that one in the theater too.
Oh, right. Wow.
You guys saw the original 1936 TV show?
Oil of Olay.
It's actually on
moisturizing.
It's actually on YouTube.
Some moisturizer.
The reason why I'm bringing this up is if you guys watched the 3rd episode, it was really exciting because they had the original Buck Rogers as one of the fighters. And it's so funny, the conversation is like, have you done this before? It's like, oh, I've been doing this long before you were born.
Right.
So I was going to say that there's quite the parallel between Buck Rogers as a character and Flash Gordon as a character, because Flash Gordon was recycled for the 80s as well. So,
sure.
I mean, you get all of these old, I call them old, but it's just a previous generation's well-loved sci-fi classic character being reimagined. I mean, we often think these days that reboots are a new thing that they've come up with in the last 20 years, but no, reboots have been going on for ages.
Yeah,
I mean, how many times Superman's been rebooted, and he's about to be rebooted again?
Fans have a short memory span, that's for sure.
Well, it's not just that; it's new generations keep coming through, and they've never seen it before. So you can create a new version of an old character, and it's new for them. It's their first time for that character, unless they go back and look for the older one.
Well, I think my thing is also for those well-loved, to me at least, well-loved IPs. I seen this being done with Star Trek. I seen this being done with Star Wars. And I wish it gets done with more of the IPs that I love. Like, for example, Galactica, we talked about it briefly. Buck Rogers is one of those IPs. I would love to see an expansion. And yeah, I agree they shouldn't redo, right? I think it should be reimagined. But the fact that if it gets done, I get more expansion into that IP, which is what I love. This is one of the things that I'm loving about Star Wars and Star Trek, with so much content. We have multiple shows, multiple movies about that IP. And then yet we have stuff like Buck Rogers that is just in the forgotten realm. And I guess that's what led me to the question, because there's so many IPs that I love that I want more. I truly want more.
Yeah. What do you guys think of, we're talking about reboots and stuff, but, sometimes there are reboots, but not really a true reboot. There are reboots that maybe pick up a story in the same universe. And I would, probably obviously say, The Mandalorian is kind of like that, or Andor. We're not talking about the main characters of that original IP, but something that happens within that universe. Are you guys okay with that kind of reboot? Like, say, for Battlestar Galactica, we could say that maybe they do a reboot, but we see, an adventure from a different perspective. Something that maybe, a fleet or someone, maybe an adventure on the Pegasus. Later in Battlestar Galactica, we get the Pegasus that the crew discovered survived the original attack on the home planet. So maybe there's another Battlestar Galactica show that deals with the Pegasus up until the time that we see her in the main Galactica show.
I'm gonna go first because I'm easy. That's how it's written in the bathroom wall. So.
Oh my God.
Admiral, happy endings is fitting even better.
I am extremely happy if I get anything from an IP that I love. Like, for example, I could have a series on Buck Rogers that is based on the military squadron. Kind of like a reimagine of something similar to what Galactica is, but in the Buck Rogers world, that talks about, maybe we have Wilma Deering come up in a couple of episodes, but it's mainly concentrated on those fighters, the captain, the lieutenant, and they're going on missions after missions. It sounds exciting to me, but basically it all boils down to one thing: is I want more Buck Rogers, and that would be the perfect thing for me to see things that I normally will not see from the actual IP of the main characters, the main story. Kind of like you guys have heard me talk about the example in the Star Trek universe, for example, about the lower decks. Is something that I always wanted to see. And in the Star Wars universe, another example that I can pull is the Clone Wars. What I wanted to see, I heard talking about the Clone Wars, and I never really saw anything about the Clone Wars. And when I saw it, I was just freaking excited. So that's the thing about me and Buck Rogers. The side stories are even more excited to me than the actual main story.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I would totally accept that. And again, just to keep that universe, keep that IP alive. I think obviously Star Trek is doing such a great job at that. Star Wars as well. And I think for some fans, it might be problematic to kind of accept stories outside the main timeline. Some people call that milking it for more money, et cetera. But I think I'm with you, Robert. I would love to see more of those type of stories that take us back to that familiar place, but with a little bit of a twist, because there's a reason we fell in love with those IPs in the first place. To be able to go back and kind of experience new stories, I think is great.
Yeah, Ray, where do you stand in this issue here?
The whole thing is that it's not like somebody strapped you down to a chair and put toothpicks in your eyes and are forcing you to watch these side stories. I mean, come on, you're not forced to watch them. If the material's produced and you watch an episode or two and don't like it, you just chuck a row and don't watch the rest. So it can be done. But there are other people who are into the fandom or into the IP that want more and make more for them and make more money and make people happier. Not all the people, but the people who want to watch it. I mean, it's a free world, free society-ish. Just make some more stuff, more people watch it. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. As long as it doesn't negate or invalidate part of the main storyline, it's fine. You have to be a little careful with that sort of thing. I mean, like there was some complaints about not Andor. What was the movie that Andor was in?
What was the what?
The movie that came just before Star Wars.
Rogue One.
Rogue One.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't think of it for some reason. There were some complaints that the events in Rogue One kind of downplayed Princess Leia's role in the original Star Wars, and that it sort of put an odd sort of twist into the story where she really didn't do anything at all. And there was some people who weren't really happy about that. I guess it was just sort of the original implication of how she was involved with getting the original plans, and then it was sort of just handed to her, and then she went off and got captured. So she really didn't achieve very much. So there were some people who were complaining about how that interrupted original canon about how much she was involved in the liberation of the original plans of the original Death Star. But I mean, beyond that particular complaint, Rogue One was a fantastic movie, and it was really interesting, even though it was not an Admiral Happy Endings movie at all.
I'm going to talk about that because it's another example of a movie that is in my exceptions list. Because you would think, okay, I would hate this movie because of the ending, obviously. But the thing is, I remember watching the original 3 movies, and I remember everybody, especially in the first one, how they were talking about how they got the plans, right? And this is something that I wanted to see, something that I wanted to know. And when I saw that movie, I was like, finally, I get to see what happened. So to me, I guess the only, if I think about it and I have to explain why I like a movie where everybody dies, is The fact that I don't see it as a movie on itself. I see it as part of the whole story that I've been wanting to know. If that makes any sense.
Absolutely. You watch Rogue One and the original Star Wars back to back, and it's like one long movie.
Exactly.
So technically, Rogue One does end on a high note. Everybody gets awards.
Yep.
Well, it's really tricky to go back and fill in stuff that's just been mentioned by other movies. I mean, the original Star Wars was written and produced and thrown out there, not expecting it to do all that well. In fact, Lucas didn't know if it was going to go anywhere. He was just, doing a bit of fishing, seeing if people would love it, and they did way more than he was expecting. And he had all this backstory, and he finally got to make a trilogy of the backstory. And, it was completely different fare from the original three adventure movies. It was a political thriller. And that threw a few people off, but there was all these little gaps in between. In the, I mean, everybody wanted to see the big sword fight between Anakin / Darth Vader and Obi-Wan, for that, final. How did this happen? How was that situation come about? What was the pinnacle point of that description way back in Ben's little house when he first was introduced to R2? Yeah, first introduced to R2. He knew he'd spent a whole bunch of time with R2, as it turned out, but he'd just forgotten. Because he had dementia or something, but it's very hard to go back and fill in things and make it all flow and have internal consistency and make sense. So when you're creating a movie like Rogue One, where you're introducing all these really interesting characters, and you're like, why the hell weren't any of these guys in the later movies, which were the earlier movies, if you know what I mean? And the only thing you can do to make it make sense is to kill them all. So they're not there for the next movie, which was the earlier movie, which they weren't in because they weren't thought of at the time. So, filling in gaps is hard in a massive story like Star Wars. It is really hard. And you've got to say, okay, these are disposable characters, even though they're really good characters. And we'd love to have more stories about them. We can't, because we're going to kill them off because they weren't there for the earlier bit. If you get what I mean. So, yeah, time travel in movie creation is a bitch, and writing as well, because you've got this whole problem with, well, where are those characters now? What happened to them? Oh, they all died. Right. There you go. Yeah. Sorted.
I want to, in a way, to bring back, to bring us back into the movie.
To Battlestar Galactica.
There you go. Changing the conversation a little bit. There's two things that I find an issue with at least the first episode and the explanation on how Buck got there. After the fact, after watching it with an adult eye and with the understanding of science that I have now, right? And I don't know if Ray knew that I was going there, but you know me.
At some point, yeah, it was coming. I'm sure it was on the list somewhere.
So the space travel issue got resolved with another issue that I have. So let me explain what I call that an issue. If we look at any star in the galaxy right now, we're actually looking at the light as it was long ago, because that light traveled through space and it's just now hitting us, right? So what we're seeing now, for all we know, doesn't exist anymore, because that's just when the light reached us. So I've seen that explanation everywhere and most people understand it. But I never seen someone explain the different perspective, which is, some people say, why we haven't encountered alien life yet. And one of the explanations that came to my head was the same thing. The lights, we have no idea where in the universe, where in the galaxy, let's just bring it up home within our own galaxy. We're in that galaxy. There's life, and we assume that it's as far to us, we are to them as they are to us, because we look at the skies. So wouldn't it be also a fact that they would have been getting, they're probably getting the light from Earth by the time we're long gone? So why I'm saying this is to explain the vastness of space and the problem with space travel, right? So they did cleverly fix this issue on Buck Rogers by introducing what I like to call cryogenics, which I know is not exactly what happened here, right? So he was frozen, in then, what was it, 300 years after or 500 years after, came back to Earth, and he was unfrozen. Now, that's an issue because, at least with current technology, the issue we're having is the actual act of freezing damages the cells.
Yep.
So to unfreeze them, it damages even further.
It's funny because I was thinking about the exact same thing when I was doing the rewatch, and then he was all nice and comfortable on that bed after they unfroze him on the Draconian ship. I'm like, he probably should look a little bit more roughed up.
Yes.
Oh,
So-
but they have really good cryogenics technology, so that's why they were able to resuscitate successfully.
They're 500 years ahead of us.
Yeah.
I mean, they did try and explain it away by saying that it was a freak accident of the exact right combinations of gases,
right? And
to stop his body from exploding as it froze.
So the reason why I'm explaining all this is I wanted us to play at fantasy for a moment, and imagine what if obviously I have my disbelief. I enjoyed the show regardless, but if you want to force yourself to explain that in a way that makes sense in your head, and again, this is the reason why I said let's play at fantasy, right? Because this is completely fantasy and make believe. One of the things, and I guess I can go first. The galaxy, the universe, it's very vast, as I explained before. And we don't know everything there is there is out there, right? We're always discovering new metals, new everything, right? And that's the reason why science is the way it is, and why I guess I love science. It's the new discoveries. There's new discoveries every day, right? So knowing that, and the way that I can kind of like make it or force it as a believable to me is maybe he went through a space or location in space that did an instantaneous freeze to like less than milliseconds, where it conserved them instantly, and then it would be up to the Draconians and their far ahead of technology to unfreeze them in a way that is safe. That's just my mentality. I know there's a lot of flaws in there, but I want to do this exercise on make believe, as we used to do as kids, obviously with science, something close to science. So when you saw this, and I don't know if you thought as I did, but now that I mentioned, you have an idea where I'm going with this. What could be one way that you could force that to make it believable in your head? That it could be my explanation, or if you have any specific one that you want to go for. So
well, the big problem with cryogenics is that there's water in your cells in your body, and When the water freezes, it creates ice crystals. Now, if you've done any experimentation with, putting things in the freezer, you know that they expand, they swell when ice is formed, because ice takes up more space than the water that turned into ice, or the fluid that turned into ice. So you get an expansion, and that expansion breaks the cell walls, and that's what turns people into goo when they're unfrozen, because the cell walls are broken. So your cells are no longer properly contained, and the stuff inside leaks out, and you're dead, because your body can't function as a collection of cells anymore. So if this collection of gases and things that were involved in the freezing process for Buck worked in a manner that stopped ice crystals from forming, then he could freeze without damaging the cells, and therefore the future technology could then unfreeze him without also creating ice crystals, and therefore he would be functional again. That is sort of the theory that I worked off, and it was convenient for the story, and very, very lucky for Buck that it was just that particular way.
Yeah. What do you? Is there a way that something could happen fast enough that could prevent the crystals from expanding?
Just because we don't know of it with our limited experience on this planet and our current scientific method doesn't mean that it can't happen.
Okay.
So all scientists have to keep an open mind and say anything is possible, not necessarily probable.
Yes.
So if you're a reasonable scientist, and not everyone is, a lot of people are very opinionated in science, because scientists have to defend their theories and have to defend their experimentation from all comers who spend a lot of time poking holes in it. This is what peer review is. It's basically testing the veracity of what you did and whether or not it holds up under peer pressure, which is what the peer review system's all about. And if your work survives peer review, then it's considered plausible. And if it doesn't, you've got to go back and have another go. So a lot of scientists get very thingy about the way they think about things and how right it must be, because otherwise they can't function as a scientist, and therefore they're not necessarily as flexible as they should be as a scientist to understand that what we know is what we know now. It will continue to change, and we will keep finding new things and disproving old things that we thought were actually correct. And it's fluid. So anything is possible, but not necessarily probable. And that's the best way to think about it, the most concise way to think about it when you're thinking about a thought experiment like this.
Okay. I don't know if Ro has any, most likely it's just me, like most episodes.
No, that aspect of the show didn't bother me as a kid. And I think the little voiceover that you hear does kind of explain it a little bit, at least, enough to satisfy my curiosity as far as how this guy got frozen. Like Ray was saying, the perfect combination of gases and chemical, whatever. I think to me that was satisfactory, going forward. I knew that I was watching science fiction television in the 80s, so I wasn't really in that Carl Sagan mode. So I think I was good.
Well, hey, you also had to deal with talking cars that were almost indestructible.
Right.
And, there was plenty of other things that were a bit more iffy than that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, I guess this is a part of the show where I would ask, Gio always makes fun of me for this question, but final thoughts.
I think you put too many qualifiers on that. I just say Gio makes fun of you, and let's leave it at that.
Final thoughts. I guess if you guys, I can go first, or whoever wants to go first, it's okay.
Why don't we let our guests go first?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think I enjoyed this series. I remember watching it as a kid. I was all into the 80s science fiction, on television, watching this. And obviously we talked about Battlestar Galactica, very related in many ways. I enjoyed the actors as well. They were fun to watch. They had a really great chemistry together, especially Gil Gerard and Aaron Gray. And I think they actually appeared together later on in life. I think was it the Lost in Space pilot? It wasn't I can't remember what it was, but they appeared together as husband and wife I'm pretty sure it was either Lost in Space or something.
Look it up.
Yeah, you should. But it again, it was great. It was great to see them in that. But it's always fantastic to see these great actors from television from your youth. When you revisit a series, and Buck Rogers is definitely one of them. A lot of fond memories. We joked about Beady Beady Beady, but that robot voiced by the wonderfully talented Mel Blanc was definitely a treat. It had some really interesting concepts. The Computer Council, among other things. So it wasn't purely popcorn science fiction mindless stuff. It had some interesting things, as all good sci-fi should, I think. But I definitely enjoyed the show.
Awesome. You want me to go next, Ray, or you want to go next?
I'll go next, so you can wrap it up. So yeah, I mean, the cast was strong, the writing was strong, the special effects and sort of like sets and clothes and everything. They'd obviously had experience with Battlestar Galactica, so they were. This was a show that hit the ground running. They didn't need a lot of time to get their shit together before they started hitting their stride. They hit their stride straight out of the box. And I think choosing Gil Gerard as the laid back, out of time spaceman, he was a perfect casting for that role, because he just had it in spades. And I mean, anybody who lived through that era, if you go back and watch this, it's really settled within its niche and its time as a product of the late 70s, early 80s. And you can see the pedigree of where all the influences came in this show for the production side of it. The writing side of it, we've discussed about them maybe doing a reboot, and I think it would have to be rewritten, at least in some spaces, quite significantly to suit the modern palette as is considered by the censorship boards and things like that of today. Slave girls and all those sorts of things are pretty much off the table these days. To the point that I was wondering how I was going to watch this, because I couldn't find it anywhere online that would allow me to watch it. In fact, Tubi's really smart. They can tell that I was working through a VPN through the US, and I couldn't even watch it on Tubi. It was unavailable content to me, even VPNing. So I was scratching my head as to how I was going to watch it, and then it magically popped up on what's called 9 Now, which is the streaming service from one of our free-to-air broadcasters. So I was really, really lucky that happened. So I got to watch it on there. But the thing that made I had to laugh was that when Buck's dressed as a worker on the flight deck of the Draconis, and he's putting the bombs into the tailpipes of the fighter bombers before they take off, he gets sprung by Tigerman. And I had to laugh because you could never get away with it today. Buck roofies the princess. You could not get away with that today on television. You just couldn't. It's just such a oh my God, you drugged a woman? You can't drug a woman. So they would not be allowed to do that today. And then he put Tigerman in stunned him and put him in the bed with the princess. And the princess was like, what are you doing in my bed? She freaks out. Anyway, Tigerman goes off to Ricky's revenge on Buck for doing that to him. And he finds Buck, and they're having a fight. And Buck even being like quite a chunky guy, he can't like even push Tigerman back because he's just a monster. And he ends up kicking him in the nuts, turning him around, putting a bomb in his pants and pushing him away, which was a great scene. I remembered it after I saw it, but it was really weird because Buck's standing there like this, and suddenly Tigerman's facing the other way and Buck's putting a bomb in his pants. The censorship board edited out the kick in the nuts on the stream that I was watching. And I'm like, seriously? Violence is fine, but violence to genitals is not fine. And I'm just like, oh, censorship boards, you're just weird. You're just really, really weird. So, I mean, they would have a little bit of a hassle trying to reboot this in some ways, because you can't quite be so blasé anymore with, you know, kicking people in the nuts or having slave girls or any of that sort of stuff. So it would have its upsides and its downsides. I'm sure good writers could work around that, but it wouldn't be the same. I mean, this show has its classic place within sensibilities and the time and the material it was made from and the writing and the stars and how it was acted, and don't ever change. It's fantastic. If you can appreciate 70s, 80s sci-fi, go watch this. You'll really love it.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Mine comes from a place of nostalgia. I really, really enjoy this. It's basically part of my sci-fi growing up. I was, like I said, I was 9 when this movie came out. What I find is this TV show and the movie is the fact that it was very endearing. It was. It wasn't, you know, and I guess this means a little bit more to me than most of the average person out there, because knowing that I don't like dark stuff typically. But it's very, very endearing, very, very lighthearted, yet it has its nuggets of deep sci-fi in it, which I really appreciate. So if you haven't really seen this and you maybe encounter because of what we have mentioned, because obviously this hasn't been remade or it hasn't been in the mainstream since the 70s, right? I suggest if you like lighthearted sci-fi with a little bit of, you know, deep thought in it, this definitely would be, and especially if you like Battlestar Galactica from the 70s, this will be your jam. So I strongly recommend it.
Agreed.
It's a hidden gem.
Yep. Okay. Let's uncover it for the listeners.
So, Ro, thank you so much for being on our show once again. I know I speak for everybody when I say we have a lot of fun. And, you know, let's keep this going. You know, hopefully we can bring you back and we can do more episodes. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always have fun talking to you guys and just getting into the weeds of science fiction. And, you know, these shows are, again, you know, just really great nostalgic wise. They were obviously a product of the time. But it's always fun to kind of rewatch some classic science fiction television from that era. So really enjoyed my rewatch, and yeah, happy to come back anytime.
Awesome. And for all of our audience that don't know who you are or where you're coming from, which it's a crime. You should have just stopped, paused our episode, go download, and then come back to us. But can you tell our audience who you are, where you're from, and where they can find you?
Absolutely. If you have a smart speaker in your home, just reach out with your hand, use the force, and say, hey, whatever your smart speaker is called, play the latest Scarif Scuttlebutt podcast, and you should be able to hear me and the rest of the team here at our podcast talking about all sorts of wonderful things. A lot of Star Wars, but we dive into other things like Galactica, like other science fiction, Marvel, the MCU movies, anything that any cool geek is talking about, we are talking about it too. So Scare Scuttlebutt, and find us wherever you find your other favorite podcasts.
Awesome.
Are you on to The Mandalorian yet? Season 3?
Yes, we did a review of the first episode last week. We do a live show on Saturdays. I'm not sure we're going to do a review every week, but I did watch last, what is it? Was it yesterday? The second episode of The Mandalorian, and really enjoyed it. First one, not so much. First episode, not so much. Second episode really hit all the marks for me. And again, yes, really enjoyed it.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, Ray.
Yep.
Should we do the next segment?
The final. Yep.
Science and sci-fi.
So obviously, the older that the property is, there's more options for us having ideas taken from it and developed as scientific fact rather than science fiction theory. And of course, this particular show has a lot of interesting aspects about possible future technologies that have been worked on in the intervening 40 years because there's been plenty of time for them to get on with it. So obviously, you had a number of them up there about cryogenics and space travel, but you've kind of hit a couple of high points on those already. My one that I was looking at was Tweaky, personal support robot, and those are the sorts of things that are now coming to the fore with technology. A lot of it out of Japan. There's a lot of interest in personal support robots in Japan because their society is trending to an older society, and there's not as many young people as there are older people. And obviously their boomer bulge is right up there in the retirees section now, and they're short on workers to support these people. So they're working on technological replacements for support personnel to help people in their twilight years. So I've got a now it's Reader's Digest, so please forgive me for referencing Reader's Digest, but you find information where it exists. Reader's Digest, a trusted friend in a complicated world. I wonder who came up with that tagline. But yeah, Reader's Digest has been around for a long time, so it can't be all that bad. But this particular report is about 25 real-life robots that already exist. And it was February 27th, 2023, so fairly recent. And they're talking about different types of robots, autonomous mobile robots, especially moving equipment around in places like hospitals. One of the hospitals in Sydney that my wife was in when she had leukemia, and I spent a fair bit of time trudging in and out of hospitals, and they had autonomous robots moving the food around. So they'd put all the food trays on the autonomous robot, and it would take it off to the part of the hospital where the ward was that was the people were. It was time for their meals, and the robot would take the food off so that it freed up the chefs to keep cooking rather than be transporting. So there's sort of robot technologies that, rather than interacting with people, they're just replacing sort of low-grade personnel that would be doing transport jobs and things like that. So there's also automated guidance vehicles, articulated robots, cobots, which are more the ones that will like hold your hand and sort of try and support you when you're going through hard times. Humanoid hybrids, and then they mention a few examples. There's a robot called Shaky, another one called Pepper, which is sort of a little humanoid robot with a screen in the front of it. and it's sort of like making screen technology more approachable for older people who aren't used to interacting with screens the way our kids like take to them, like they want them implanted in their bodies. My son lives on my iPad, so you sort of get used to that. But another one called Atlas from Boston Dynamics, which is sort of the humanoid one, which you can jump around. You can see that videos of that all over the internet. There's Spot, the dog-shaped robot, which can be used as a pack mule for military forces, and could also have an arm attached to the top of it so that it can manipulate things, can go and pick stuff up. The Domino's delivery robots, Asimo, which is produced by Honda, can do Japanese sign language, and can run at speeds up to 5.6 miles per hour or 3,642 washing machines per minute.
Nice.
Joke. Now by Mitsubishi, and then there's things like Roombas, Walker X, telepresence robots, which are the ones that are sort of can trundle around in the workplace with a screen which shows your face on it, so you can sort of semi-interact when you're outside the office with things that are going on in the office, and it sort of gives you a presence within meetings and things like that. That's a little bit more than just you being on a screen and being part of the background. It actually brings a person that's limited to a screen into the foreground. Amica, Adaby Robot, Whammo, RoboBear, Snag, Sophia. Just about everybody's heard of Sophia. But there's heaps and heaps and heaps of them. In fact, far more than I was aware of. There's the Da Vinci medical system, where it's not autonomous, but a doctor will sit at a viewing station with sort of like joysticks and things to control the Da Vinci robot that actually does the medical procedure. So rather than the doctor getting tired and their hand shaking and them cutting the wrong things, the robot has absolute control and never gets tired, never gets shaky. So it sort of helps doctors when they're doing long operations and things like that, not to suffer from the limitations of the human body. So there's like robotic lawnmowers, RoboFish. So I'll give you the link to this article so that actually no, it's in the Trello, so you can add it to the show notes, Robert. But it's really interesting the amount of different companies that are working on robots for different tasks, and where they're coming to the fore. And with countries like Japan that are suffering a sort of an inverse pyramid of population, they've got to find ways to fill in that base of a lack of people, lack of boots on the ground. They don't have people there to do the jobs, so they need to find another way to do it. And these autonomous and semi-autonomous robotic devices are filling that gap. The Japanese have always been pretty big in the last 50 years on, being at the front of the wave of technology, and in this case, they really need it. So it's very interesting where these sort of technologies will go. And of course, with any technology, it has its upsides and its downsides. In places that don't have that sort of inverse pyramid of population, there'd be a lot of complaints of people losing jobs to robots because they don't need to rest and they don't get distracted and so forth and so on, and companies may find them cheaper and easier than dealing with striking low wage workers and things like that. But I mean, everything has its upsides and its downsides. You can cook with a knife, you can kill with a knife. So there's pluses and minuses to every single technology that humans have ever invented. You may even say, oh, what about nuclear weapons? There's no pluses to that. Well, actually, yeah, there is. We haven't had a world war since they were invented. So you can look at it that way. The threat of them is enough to stay the hands of political leaders that would otherwise have gone to war. So even though we've felt like we've almost died in nuclear holocaust a couple of times since nuclear proliferation was a thing, I think it's actually prevented more wars than it's threatened to start. So everything has an upside and a downside. We've just got to work on maximizing the upsides and limiting the downsides. So a little bit of, social kindness and understanding will go a long way when new technology comes in. And rather than just trying to maximize profits, we should think about, how it's going to impact society and who's going to suffer and who's going to, be better off. And of course, when you're in the start of a wave of technology like this, you're producing all this stuff, you're using up resources, but then once these devices have run through their lives, they've got to be either recycled or trashed, and that part of it needs to be worked out yet too. How these equipments are going to be maintained, how long they're going to be maintained for. With a lot of technology, you buy something and then there's a new one 3 weeks later. Do they slow down the technological release cycles of these things, or do they try and have upgrades rather than brand new versions, and what's going to happen to those pieces of technology which are then left behind because they're no longer up to date. So all of this sort of stuff has to be considered for the whole of society, just not for profit margins. And if we can manage to do that, maybe we won't end up like the world of Buck Rogers in 2491 with a nuclear holocaust and one city and everything else is crap. So let's hope it doesn't end up like that.
Awesome. Oh, okay. Well, again, for all of
hang on. I had one more thing. I call this the science fiction behind science fiction. And we did cover a little bit of this earlier, but I just wanted to bring it. I just wanted to mention it just before closing, in that we have mentioned that obviously the writers and the producers and the sci-fi team from Battlestar Galactica were involved with the production of this show. And it's clear in the DNA of the show and the special effects of the show that there was some recycling going on. Just talking about recycling of future technologies. This is recycling of entertainment technologies, in that if you're a fan of the original Battlestar Galactica and you've watched it at least once, if you listen for the sound effects and look at the special effects and the props and things that they use, then you go and watch this show, you will see some things that you've seen before. There's banks of equipment with lights and switches and things that you will recognize from out of the Battlestar Galactica. As Robert, you mentioned before, the launch tubes are the Battlestar Galactica launch tubes with the same sound effects, except they've got different colored lights. So it's sort of like yellow, pink, orange, red, instead of just red all the way through.
The ships got recycled too. The ships got altered.
Yep, they did.
Insane.
The laser sound is exactly the same as the Vipers. They obviously made a new capital ship model for the Draconis, but they use the same launch tubes. They use the same landing area off the Battlestar Galactica in this one, although they placed it in a different position. But the canopy on Wilma's Earth fighter was actually a repainted canopy from a Viper from Battlestar Galactica. You can actually tell. And not all, but some of the internals of the cockpit were the same as a Viper, and the joystick was exactly the same. It was exactly the same joystick from a Viper.
Wow.
So there's a lot of Battlestar Galactica DNA in this show, basically it was changed enough that it was different, but a real aficionado could pick these things up. So yeah, I didn't hate it. I actually quite enjoyed that I could spot things that I'd seen before. So.
I think it adds to the nostalgia, especially if you are a fan of the original Galactica series, it actually plays into that because I really enjoyed it as well. I really, really did. Awesome. Well, for all of you out there, thank you so much for being on another episode with us. We really enjoy talking about these subjects, and I hope that you enjoy as well. Let's continue the conversation. Reach out on YouTube. You could actually put comments in there, so just make sure you like, subscribe. We really need the subscriptions. But we can comment in there. Reach out to us on Twitter. Also, if you're not in our Discord, reach out. All the links are actually on our description page. So let's continue talking about this. I'm really curious to know from you guys and see if you like Buck Rogers. What was your thoughts? And all the same questions that we ask in the show. I'm really curious to know your answers. So reach out and let's grow this engagement. Let's talk sci-fi. And again, I never get tired of saying this. Thank you so much for making us your pod and for the engagement and the conversations. We really appreciate you guys coming in week after week to listen and watch us during all these IPs that we love so much, and that we hope that we eventually cover most of the ones that you love as well. And if we haven't, reach out and we'll put it on the list.
Yeah, come talk to us on the Discord and we'll discuss about your favorite IP and see if you'd like to come join us and talk about it here.
Awesome. Again, thank you so very much for being with us one more time, and we can't wait to have you for our next episode. Goodbye.
Bye.